give a big round of applause for Mr. Tom Baker, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is very agreeable. It's always very pleasant to be received by a full house. In a moment or two, I just invite you to ask me questions, which will be the quickest way to get to know me. I don't really mind what sort of questions you ask me, as long as you're not surprised by my answers. But it's an amazing thing to come so far, right across the world, isn't it? And be known and be received by fans. The fans who actually, I'm very aware after all these years, you weren't born when I started out, but who have actually not only created me as a kind of professional entertainer, since Doctor Who was my only great worldwide success, but not only created me and turned me into a success, but have, you really should take credit for this, I insist that you take credit for this, you have actually sustained my success. As the years have ravaged me, and as producers have died or turned away from me or anything, fans remain loyal. Of all, I'm very interested in love. When I was young, I wanted to be, of course, loved, and as I grew older, I want to be loved a lot more. And at my age now, I need to be adored. It's fans that provide that, because of all love, which is basically the important thing in our lives, of all love, fan love seems to me, the affection of fans, the loyalty of fans, seems to me to be the most enduring. It's an amazing thing. I suppose it's something to do with, we look at old fictional heroes like me, very old fictional heroes, and we are reminded of the safety of our youth or of our childhood or whatever it is, and the fun that it gave us. And by association, the affection is reinforced and grows, or at least if it doesn't grow, does not die. And for that, I'm very grateful indeed. So to come right across the world and be received like this, though, it's very nice. There we are. So I suppose the very best thing to do, I mentioned it quite quickly that I'm here just to do some kind of jolly commercials about securing people's future. I didn't quite know the meaning of that, but since I'm entirely all past. But that's why I came down here. I'm here only for a few days and have to return to work on Wednesday. So I think someone should ask me some questions, and then something might emerge. Who knows? Go on. Yeah, go on. Oh, well, it's taken me a long time to come to New Zealand because there really isn't anything, obviously, in terms of work for kind of aging actors to do. There really isn't. And so that's kept me away. I have been invited sometimes, but it just didn't work out, that's all. And it's such a long way. Yep. I'm fronting a science fantasy, science fact of a series of programs, 12 1 hours, I think, for the BBC radio. And then I'm on standby to go to India for a 4-hour television thing called The Rising, because this is the anniversary year of the Black Hole of Calcutta. And so, naturally, we've got this windy old imperialistic nonsense. And I'm supposed to be some irascible old boy, which, of course, I can do without batting an eyelid. I just roll my eyes and, and growl a bit. And actually, the part isn't completely written up. I've already suspended it because I said, look, it isn't enough. It isn't large enough, nor irascible enough to go all the way to India, for 4 weeks or whatever it is. But they promised, the Indian director promised that they would rev it up a bit. So that's why I've got to go back. Otherwise, it would be nice to stay here. I honestly, of course, I'm sure, living in a beautiful place like this, I've only looked at pictures of the rest of New Zealand, but coming from the outside world, I mean, even allowing for my sense of hyperbole, as I really thought, I said the other day, I thought I died and gone to heaven, I mean, because when I was young, I was very keen on getting to heaven. Now I'm very keen on getting to New Zealand, and I'm very sorry to be leaving it indeed, because it seems to me, I walked, as you can see from my poor face, 5 or 6 miles just now, and my friend Louise was waiting for me to bring me here, but it seems to me to be perfect, all this space,
And people look generally so well, and you don't have those tortured grimaces everywhere. Yeah, I'm sure you've got them, but you keep them well hidden. And you know, it just seems to me to be so gentle, and you all seem to be generally very friendly and everything, which of course springs out of all this space and all this temperate climate and all this fruit. Somebody sent me some plums yesterday, the like of which I have never had, and if it hadn't been for you coming to see you today, I'm very impressionable, wanted to die after I'd eaten the plums. I mean, they were perfect. Absolutely, I must find out tomorrow from what variety they were. So altogether, it seems to me to be heaven. Of course, the amazing thing about heaven, as those of you who have a literary turn of mind, who remember John Milton's Paradise Lost and then Paradise Regained, but Paradise Lost, of course, springs entirely from that tragic flaw in nearly all natures, even angelic natures, where in Paradise, Lucifer, as you know, we called a match after him years later, Lucifer actually got fed up with paradise, didn't he? And he rose up against God. And look what came of him. Don't do that. So maybe you take it for granted. And maybe after a few months here, I would take it for granted. And it makes me shudder to think that I would, because it seems to me to be perfect, to be paradise. Yeah. No one else? Is that all the questions? Yes. Well, I don't think I can possibly retire, you know, because the thing is about being a proper actor. By that I mean an actor, a real actor. I'm not now talking about how good an actor one is, but a real actor is only real when he's fictional. This is one of the delightful paradoxes of being an entertainer. I only feel real when I'm someone else. When I'm reduced to Tom Baker or just my wife having dinner, I find life harder. In fact, to sit down night after night with the most important, isn't it amazing about the most important people in your life? We're talking about taking for granted. I sit down opposite my wife. I cannot live without my wife. You know, when she goes out of the house, I get nervous and phone her on the mobile. And yet, I can't live with her. She makes nearly all of the positive decisions. She was the only clever thing I ever did. And yet, when I'm with her, I frequently can't stand the sight of her. This is a kind of one of the paradoxes of it, isn't it? And if she eats, because she's a very healthy girl, and if she eats lots of salad, which makes an awful lot of noise, it makes me very edgy. The sound of people eating celery makes me very agitated indeed. And this can, of course, these kind of neuroses can grow. So that, actually, I live in an old school, so it's a big house. So my wife and I often are apart when we're in the same house, which is very handy for our conjugal life, you know, because every now and then we meet and we're surprised. She's on the other side of the house, now on this side. But anyway, when she eats celery, I leave the room usually, and she understands that. She's very flexible. But anyway, quite recently, I was sitting in the kitchen, and I could hear this terrible crunching, like the sound of shale being shoveled into a tin wheelbarrow. And so I screeched. She was right up in the other classroom. I screeched up there, "You're eating celery." I cried. And a little voice came back. She said, "No, I'm not." I said, "You are." And I rushed in, not wanting to be proved wrong, forced her mouth open because she would do anything for me. And I saw that she wasn't eating celery. And as I peered into her open mouth and her eyes looking quite surprised, I looked in there like that and listened. See how she was good to me. She could have bitten my ear then. And I listened, and I couldn't smell any celery, so very noticeable. And still I could hear. I looked through the Gothic window across the churchyard, and I thought, it can't be anyone in there eating celery. I mean, it's a very old churchyard. Most of them are dead by the turn of a century. And still I could hear the crunching. And then I saw this farmhouse in a distance. Jamie Clark, his name is. So I phoned the thing in a frenzy. His wife, Sue, answered the phone. I said, "Sue, it's Tom Baker here." "Yes, Tom. Do you want to come over for a drink?" "No," I said. "Is someone eating celery over there?" And she said, "Good God, here, Jamie's having celery now." "How do you know that? You're 300 yards away." So one has to be very careful about these, you know, these kind of neuroses which grow and grow and grow. But on the other hand, kind of creative people, writers and actors and mouth organ players, you know, thrive. They actually create out of anxiety, really. Because I suppose it's anxiety that allows you to refract your vision of how you say things, how you see things. So if you want to be something like an actor or a writer, and you've been brought up absolutely happily and healthily, you know, and not being battered by your parents and no poverty, and it's actually quite difficult to become a novelist here because you haven't got much to be going on with, have you? because happiness actually isn't all that commercial as a subject for a novel. Any other questions? Yep.
An actor says that they are continually learning their craft as they go. Do you sometimes in the middle of a working day think, I've just done something new or I've just learned something new? Does it ever come to you like that?
No. Sometimes people come up to me and say, you just did something new, Tom. And sometimes they say, and you shouldn't have done. That wasn't the line. That happened several times during trying to do these commercials. No, I didn't. But you were always seeking, but the point is actually when you're trying to language is largely made up, as you know, and acting is expressed often in language, not always, but often, is expressed in cliches. We talk in popular music titles, we know about sequences of notes which are recognizable, and people exchange cliches. So most communication is in the area of cliches like, how are you? Very well, okay, what a nice day, raining yesterday. And I like it also when three people are looking at some penguins, and they all say to each other, look, penguins. We can all see that. We're reassured by that. But when it comes to drama, of course, language then changes. And the great dramas of classical dramas of Shakespeare or Johnson or people like that, then you're into another area of music, as you would move from popular, easy music, easy listening music into great classical music. So how you do things, how you then express emotions or tell a story, the real fun is how do you do it surprisingly, because otherwise, when you watch television, for example, we think that we know the way we behave from the way people behave on television. If somebody answers the phone on television, for example, if the phone is engaged, have you noticed they pick up the phone like that? They get dialed and pick up the phone like that, and they engage something, it goes boop, 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 and they always look at the phone and put it down, don't they? If the actor actually it goes boop, 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 and the actor puts the phone down, you say, just a minute, he didn't look at it. And if someone walks through a door in television, they don't actually walk out of a door. They always stop at the door and say, and another thing. They always do that, don't they? It's absolutely amazing. And the men in television, they're always sarcastic to women. It's extremely rare that you hear a character on television say something nice to a girl. Or if they do say something nice, it's kind of grudging, So there's a kind of school of sarcasm, as if that's the way everyone behaves, but it's not. It's the way they go on television. And so you might see a middle-aged lady watching her husband looking at a very beautiful girl, say on rollerblades or something, and the husband might say to his wife, why didn't you come like that? And she says, what, with a figure like mine? And he says, no, with a figure like hers. And we laugh like that, but it's kind of cruel, isn't it? It's always that kind of sarcasm. I find that rather dull myself. I prefer something more mischievous or old-fashioned, but then I am old-fashioned. Dance me, yeah, go on. Are you just scratching, or are you going to ask me a question? Yeah, I saw you do that. Yes, anyone else? Go on. Well, the lady asked when I took it over was, how did it go? I didn't really know what I was doing. At the time, I was very out of work, although I'd had a flirtation with movies which had failed. In fact, I've been very successful at courting failure, and I'm not complaining about that because it has been quite interesting. But when I took over the part, I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. I had no idea. Everything was an accident. So, the scarf and all that sort of thing. It just grew because we had a fortnight to run around costume places and try getting dressed up, and it was great fun, and we had lots of drinks, and I was excited about that, but I didn't know what I was doing, and maybe that was why I was successful. I didn't know what I was doing. I was playing this alien, and often working on 4 or 6 scripts at the same time. I used to say to the script girl, what do I do in this scene? And there was quite a lot, if you recall, those of you who really know about it, when sometimes I would look at things like that, and that was because the lines were written on my hands. I used to say, and because I could never remember. I always used, no one ever picked it up, that whenever I was using the coordinates or the correlatives, I've forgotten now which, and it doesn't matter, I always quoted the BBC telephone number, 7438,000, EX4111, which was the BBC and our extension of Doctor Who. No one ever noticed. It was incredible. And all over the TARDIS were bits of tape, with this nonsensical gibberish that we had to speak, and I quickly cottoned on that it was fun. It didn't matter about the nonsense. The real thing was the conviction of the character, to be surprised and to be within the predictability, to be surprised and and to enjoy the adventures. You know, that was the real thing, isn't it? Which is what we all want to do, to enjoy adventures. Yes.
You mentioned fly. Now, one thing I thought about your characterization of the Doctor was you seem to live in an almost perpetual state of surprise of the universe. How much of that was you, and how much of that was the surprise?
Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could say it was entirely me? I don't, it might have, some of it was me because really I have learned nothing in spite of having lived a fairly long life now. I haven't learned very much. I quite like, in Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote Mother Earth and Breakfast of Champions and several other marvelous books, he has a character called Kilgore Trout who lives in Transfamagor, which must be just next to Casterbarus, really, in the constellation of Gallifrey. But Kilgore Trout has this kind of Peter Pan quality. But and I was very aware of him, I liked him a lot. And in a way, he was both endearing and horrifying. But he was endearing if you told him a joke, in the sense that every time Kilgore Trout blinked or looked away, it wiped everything, you see. So suppose, what's your name? John. So I say, hello, John, and then I cough like that, and I say, John. And then I look over there, and it's John, and it always starts again, and Kilgore Trout was constantly being surprised. And I like the idea of someone who's intelligent, never becoming corrupt or knowing how to react, just to be spontaneous. You know? So if I saw a big monster, I always insisted that we cut the frightened lines until the monster hit me. That was always the fun, wasn't it? So I'd say, hello, and then he'd go bang. And when I recovered, I'd say, we've got to look out for him. But it was important that we didn't start by saying we've got to look out for him just because he's ugly or whatever, or just because he's grotesque. I thought that was, and the children were onto that very quickly. Yeah. No one at the back seems to be at all curious. Yes. Have I seen it? No, I haven't seen it. No, I have to also confess, you know, that when I was doing Doctor Who, I didn't actually see it either very much. Mostly because, of course, I had often to revoice bits or dub it or whatever it is, or sometimes at the editing I had to look at crucial bits if we wanted to tighten something up. But I didn't really much see it as it went out, on the basis that, I think a lot of actors would say this, so I'll be brief, is that you would look at it, you see, and think, if we'd had another 2 takes, we could have got that better, you know. And so what was the point of me looking at it if all the time I'd be thinking we could have done it better? It was much better to let it go, and if the audience liked it, which fortunately they did, then they would tell me they liked it, and that would satisfy me. But otherwise, if I did see sequences, I'd then be feeling antagonistic towards the director, thinking, you know, we could have made that better. So I didn't see, if I didn't watch myself, I'm not likely to see some fella doing something that's set in America. I asked my wife to do it. She does lots of things for me. And she said that it was okay, but she said it wasn't mysterious, you know. It wasn't, she said it was just a kind of an adventure story set in urban Los Angeles. So I'm very glad I didn't watch it. I was telling fortunes down the village or something like that, you know. Because, I mean, I have a great time in the village, you know, because I'm the kind of celebrity in the village. And they're very poor in the village, and I'm comparatively rich. And so what happens is I go down there, and I buy all the drinks, which is the only way they listen to me, really. And so I'm extremely popular in the local pub, and I buy the drinks, and they gather round, and I can sing out of tune, and they still say, that was great, Tom, and wink at each other. It's like I'm a kind of old Tony Lumpkin, and She Stoops to Conquer, yes, yes. I live in Kent, towards France, in England, yeah. It's called the Garden of England, and it's really lovely to look at from the air. When you're down on the ground, it's like lots of places in England, extremely dangerous because we're so densely populated. It really is. You can't go walking in the English countryside easily now. You can't go walking in the lanes because of the traffic. But it's very pleasant there, and we can see, on a clear day, you know, you can see France. And I can be in Paris, allowing, say, a 10-minute journey to Ashford Station near me. I can be in Paris 2 hours later for breakfast on the Eurostar train. We have had a big development in that way since we became members of Europe. So we go under the Channel on trains now. That's good. So you can get mugged in Ashford before breakfast and get mugged in Paris again. And it comes right up in the middle of Paris. I mean, not at these airport jobs. It comes right up in the Gare du Nord. Yes, sir. Well, Medics actually, you know, was about realistic anxieties, wasn't it? It was about the anxieties of health. I mean, thank God you all look healthy here, and no one looks as if you need to worry about that for a while yet. But I mean, hospital politics in America, where do I live? In England, are very, very acute, you know, because we are looking, I suppose, I mean, you must understand, I'm talking just as Tom Baker here, so largely out of ignorance, but there's a great preoccupation, obviously, in England about the decline of the National Health Service, which makes people very, very nervous. And so, obviously, a lot of medics was about this, you know, internecine warfare of people, you know, hustling for shares of a budget or whatever it was. Because, you know, hard questions need to be asked now. I was reminding one of my colleagues recently that in the early 1940s, after the war, one of the great founders of national health in England said, the beauty of the national health scheme is that every year the health service will become cheaper as the nation's health gets better. It was a marvelous, innocent observation. Of course, it was entirely wrong. And so now we're into situations now, aren't we, to give one man a new heart, which might cost £500,000 or £1 million, with the whole preparation, against, you know, 200 or 300 or 500 people having hip replacements. These are hard things. And so medics was not nearly so much fun as Doctor Who. It wasn't, it really wasn't, because it was about real anxieties, you know. So quite often it depressed me, really. But I tried to rev it up. Got a few laughs. Yes. Yes. Well, I don't know that I remember very much about movies at all. I think I've done about, I can't remember, maybe 15 movies, I don't know. But they all seem to me to be, except one or two, you know, where there are huge budgets. And so it was a hell of a wheeze. And you were, you know, walking around or being driven around in big cars. Because, I mean, when I became an actor, you know, I wasn't really thinking about the kind of morality of art or truth or... I was thinking really about the billing and big cars, really. You know, I mean, when you're no good at school and you can't earn a living at anything, naturally people say, have you thought about becoming an actor? If you can't do anything else. And that's why a lot of young people, because in Europe we have situations, 17 million unemployed in the European community. So for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, we have, would one say millions? I suppose out of 17 million, yeah, we have hundreds of thousands or millions of young people for the first time since the Industrial Revolution are not wanted by society. I don't mean that they're not loved by society, they're not wanted by society at large, because there is nothing for them to do. But that's a depressing thought. So that's why lots of them want to get into show business. During the Depression in America, everyone trekked west to get into movies. Here, everyone treks to Shortland Street, is it? Shortland Road? Try and get in that, yeah? What?
Yeah, on the heels of that, there was a few years ago a saying called Strangers in Paradise, basically, where if you want to be really big in anything, you've got to leave the country immediately, which a number of people have done. Have you, over the years, have you had any young scientists or young actors say, because I was inspired watching you as a child, you know, I opened my eyes to the universe and wondered,
I don't think anyone said that you opened my eyes to the universe, but lots of people have said to me, I looked at Tom Baker and I thought, if he can do it, surely I can do it. And they were absolutely right. So in a sense, I have inspired thousands and thousands of young people, and they've waved to me as they've shot past me on the way, going like that, yeah. I don't mind about that, yeah. Anyone down there? No? We'll go, yep. Yes. Well, it was terrific fun working with John Cleese, yes, because he is so staggeringly funny. No, I found it rather dull working with Rowan, because Rowan is incredibly intelligent. I mean, you know, he's a great scientist. You know, he got a first in electronics at Oxford, and then he did sarcasm at Cambridge. And he's got marvelous glossy hair and a wonderful complexion and wonderful teeth. He hasn't got a single filling. And then he went on to Edinburgh University, where he did wisdom. So he's a right bloody know-all altogether. And so when you're working with him, he's very likely to tell you how to do things, you know. And it will be a terrible mistake to listen to him, because while he's terrific at doing his own number, you know, you've got to leave other people to do it. So that was a bit boring, really. Well, it was Stephen was in it, and, you know, Baldrick and all that crap. So they were all right, Miranda Richardson. But with John Cleese, it was a scream, you know, because John is always on the... I mean, he would have been an amazing Doctor Who, wouldn't he? Because you always think he'll fragment at any moment, you know. And he was just very, very funny. Very funny to be a dear man, a very, very serious man, and very concerned. about everything and worries about everything and very, very generous. Yes, to that effect. Any dream roles that I want to play? Well, I mean, it's not as if, you know, roles are being thrown at me left, right, and center, unless I'm in a banquet or something like that. But when I was young, I was deeply, deeply religious, and I think I have to confess these things. We must be free in New Zealand, you know, and not be repressed. I think actually what drew me first to religion was I was living a rather boring life in Liverpool, and I started sniffing very early at Mass, because in those days we used to use a lot more incense than we use now. And I didn't realize it, no one else realized it. I was absolutely hooked on sniffing incense, you know. So I was hallucinating at an early age with paths of being, you know, pious. They said, that boy, you know, he really sees things. They didn't know. They didn't know, you know, I was using that much charcoal and holding the thurible very close to my nose as the priest put the fine incense on. And then I liked all the clothes, you know, all those long clothes. In other words, I like dressing up in frocks, really. And I realize now this impulse hasn't entirely left me, because I keep having a real desire to, because I'm a great admirer of Oscar Wilde and all that kind of jolly line of, you know, wits. I have a great desire to play Lady Bracknell. But, you know, absolutely straight. Really, I'd like to play her straight with a big headdress and high-heeled shoes, so that I was about 7'4", yeah. And yeah, quite fierce, yes, because it's a most marvelous play. I read it very often. I love it, yes. Anyone else? Yes? What maybe, I told you what made me go into acting, you know, I couldn't earn a living. And when I was in the army, it was easy, you know, I just started a long time ago. It really started when, in the war, when the Germans were bombing Liverpool. And I've never stopped being grateful to the Germans. I always, you know, well, I'm nice to German people because they really revved my childhood up and broke the monotony. And it was great seeing buildings ablaze, and so you didn't go to school much because the schools were on fire. And so, you know, children like that, don't they? We were going around collecting, you know, fragments of bombs called shrapnel, because you didn't, you know, I just thought it was marvelous, really. In fact, my earliest ambition, I've been writing about this recently, my earliest ambition was to be an orphan. And, well, that sounds awful now. I mean, that was my ambition. And now, you know, I look back and could weep at the thought of how much my mother loved me and how much I loved her. But at the time, I wanted to be an orphan when I was little. Children could be corrupted very early, and the reason was, if your mother was blown up by a German, then you got presents from America. You got those funny hats, you know, and sweaters and crossword puzzles. You know, the Americans, they kind of bomb you into accepting aid, you know, or they're always great on sending you presents like that. And so instantly, what they did was that the kids who were orphaned were hated by those of us who still had our mothers. Because it seemed to me, as it would to a child, wouldn't it, that there was an advantage to being an orphan. This is wrong, you know. It is not an advantage to be an orphan, generally speaking. So I was praying away, you know, imploring God and singing to him, you know, because he likes to be serenaded. I was imploring him to make me an orphan. I remember when I told my mother about it, she hit me so hard that I fell against a sideboard on which there was a kind of carved bowl of fruit. And until quite recently, it was on my passport. It said, you know, bunch of grapes. And it's only gone recently, since I got married. Yeah? Is it true I don't like her? Oh, no, I'm sure I loved her. Louise Jameson. I may have put, sometimes, you know, when you're in a series and you've got to talk every week about it or whatever it is, it's quite nice not to make it all sweetness and light, you know, because I told you, you know, happiness is death to the ratings. You know, what people thrive on at the trivial area of television, you know, is anxiety and double talk and lies and betrayal, like any soap opera, really. And so, you know, if you put it round that you don't like Louise, that's going to get you more publicity than if you say, oh, she's a sweet girl, you know, and, you know, and I'm always, you know, bouncing her baby on my knee. That's boring now to the press. They don't want to know that. No, I was very fond of her. I was obviously fonder of some girls than I was of others. I hope you'll forgive me for that. I actually married one of them due to a misunderstanding. I mean, I do remember, I think about her very affectionately now because it was a very brief thing, like some misunderstandings are. And I do remember that she said a very witty thing because she was a bright girl. In America, she was at some university or something, and so someone said, this is Lalla Ward I'm talking about, and of whom I have great memories. And somebody said, who was your favorite monster? And quick as a flash, she said, Tom Baker. Isn't that great? Yeah, yes. She's married again and is very happy now, yes. Yes, sir? I never met the other doctors except by accident, and I avoid them like the plague if I possibly can. I think it's absolutely pathetic to see a kind of clutch of shagged out old Doctor Who's altogether. I really do. I avoid them like the plague. And also, they're much nicer than me. You know, they're very good-mannered because they're BBC chaps. And in fact, they're worse than good-mannered. They're bloody charming. And if there's something I can't stand, it's charm. I really think that charm is a suspect quality, you know. Charm is a kind of facility people have of switching it on, don't they? They say, go on, get over there and put the charm on. As soon as someone's charming to me, I get restless. Right, so that's done the Doctor Who's. Yeah? I wasn't in the Five Doctors. I'll tell you something. I wasn't in the Five Doctors, and so unimportant was my performance in Doctor Who. I refused to be in it because they had better lines than I had. And so I said, I'm not being in it unless I have the best lines. And they were all saying, well, I want the best lines. It was really quite grown up. So I refused to be in it. And do you know what? You know what they did? They went down to Madame Tussauds, which is the waxworks, and they hauled me out of the waxworks and put me in the bloody film. And I had another fellow running round, you know, in the middle shot, dressed up as me. I wasn't in the film, and yet everyone thinks I was. I mean, they had to pay me for that wax performance, but no one noticed it. No one noticed it at all. So, you see, I've got no grand ideas about my, yes. Yes. I have a book coming out in October, November for the Christmas market. It'll be out here, yes. I accepted some money to tell my story. And it's called, I was going to call it All Friends Betrayed, because that sums it up, really. You know, the kind of Judas of equity. But that only sprang out of anxiety. But now it's a kind of pun now. So it's called Who on Earth is Tom Baker? That's what it's called, yes. And I was rereading it recently because I've got to deliver the last few words when I get back next week. And I reread it recently, and it's just an appalling story. I mean, it really is a dreadful story. I scarcely believed a word of it. But it might amuse you, yes? Well, I will mention my visit to New Zealand because extraordinary things happen. Somebody rang up last night who was at school with me, and he lives in Wellington, and he told me a story that was all very nice, you know, and heartfelt, and it catapulted him back over so many years. And I remembered him quite well, and he was rather touched about that. And then, what else happened all in the space of a day? Oh, yes, I had about 500 photographs taken of myself yesterday. Then I had a conversation with a fellow from Donkeys half a century ago. And then I went into Chin Chin's, you know, on the waterfront, where Sir Anthony Hopkins, I think, is at the moment working as a waiter, obviously rehearsing a film. I mean, it is, honestly. I said, Tony. He said, shh. And he's going round, you know, slightly stooped and charming everybody. And I said, you're Tony Hopkins. And he said, shh. He said, they call me Rolf, actually. I'm Austrian. But it was obviously Tony Hopkins. Anyway, that was quite impressive. And so he said to me, if you don't stop calling me Tony Hopkins, I'll call you John Pertwee, which really wounded me, you know. I mean, it wouldn't have wounded me if John had been alive. It was the fact that John was dead. But anyway, I had this quite nice, charming dinner and with my wife, and we didn't speak much. And then I sent for the bill, and Anthony said, so you said your bill's been paid for. I said, what? He said, someone's paid your bill. I said, oh, come on. I said, I can't have people paying my bill in restaurants like that. You know, this is silly. Thank whoever it was who wants to take my bill. He said, no, it's paid for. So he's a friend of yours. He said he knows you very well. So I went over, and there was this terribly good-looking, vigorous young fella in his mid-30s. curly hair and nice eyes, a lovely, reckless smile. And I thought he looked familiar. And I said, because I come from quite a big family, I said, "Are you a Fleming?" He said, "No, I'm a baker. I'm your son Piers." Honestly, Louise will bet out, I swear to God, that was happened last night in New Zealand. Isn't that amazing? And he wasn't at all annoyed that I didn't recognize him. And he is so well, and he actually grafts, he's a very, very highly accomplished horticulturalist, or whatever you call it. And he can graft trees and shrubs, and especially roses. And they fly him in, he works here, and then he goes back to the south of France and gradually works his way. I knew he worked in Europe a lot, that's why I don't see him much. Because actually, I come from a very fragmented sort of family, and I'm often quite... Once I was outside BAFTA, which is the British Academy of Films, in Piccadilly, not long ago, as in last year, and there was some sort of do going on there, so they dragged people back, you know, and we were all amazed and said, "Gosh, are you still alive?" and all that sort of thing. And I was desperately hoping you'd be given the part of the father of Lazarus or something like that. And suddenly, a voice, a girl said to me, "Here, girl, I just have my beer." Voice, she said, "Hello, Tom." You know, that awful inflection, which means, "Aren't you going to be surprised when you turn round?" So I put my beer down, and I turned round, and there was this woman. I said, "Ah." I said, "Hi there, how are you?" She said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" I said, "Oh, I've played this scene 1,000 times before." I said, "Of course I do." I said, "Remember you? National Theatre, 1974. She said, "No, it wasn't." I said, "No, of course it wasn't." I had to do what Del Boy does in Only Fools and Horses, you know, mange tout, he said, instead of mange. I said, "Of course not. It was the Royal Shakespeare Company, as you like it, wasn't it?" She said, "No, it wasn't." So anyway, I could tell this story in real time, but you grow old. I said, "Of course not." I said, "Granada Television play for today." She said, "No, it wasn't." And if only I had faith, I thought, and could make this girl disappear. And she obviously wasn't going to disappear. So I said, "No, I'm so sorry." I said, "But it was a play, wasn't it?" She said, "No, we used to be married." It's extraordinary, isn't it? You know? So I reached for my beer like that, and I had a pull at it. When I turned around, she'd gone. So I couldn't be certain whether she had been married to me or not. But that's one of the things, you know, as the parts and the memories all kind of intertwine, so that one doesn't really know where one is, or indeed who one is. Because, you know, one of the problems is some people get rattled about not knowing who they are, but I've come to terms with it. Yes, anyone else? Go on. Well, not very often. I mean, I'm excited to see you because you've never seen me before except on television. I've certainly never seen you. I've never seen you before, so it's brand new. But all the old Doctor Who's are always, you know, on all the motorways, a bloody place is full of old Doctor Who's thumbing their way to Manchester, you know, to go and meet the fans, you know. And the fans give them sandwiches and things like that, and sometimes give them a lift back to the motorway. And if I wanted to go to America, where, as you know, science fantasy and science fiction is very, very big business, then I could obviously live in America, going with the Trekkies who go, you know, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in all the big cities. There are very serious science fantasy conventions on a very big scale, with lots of merchandising, and of course the Americans are, in such a huge country, are so excited to meet each other. And then they say, "See you next week in Kansas," you know. So you've got to keep notes about the jokes you crack in America. I could do that all the time if I wanted to, but again, I'd be stuck with this British contingent, you know. And so I don't do that. Occasionally, you know, actually, to Christmas before last, I went to New York and recited a Christmas carol. I made them all cry. They liked that, yeah. I adored them. Yes, they all wept and wept. It was amazing, yes. I haven't been offered a role in Star Trek, and the reason why I would never be offered a role in Star Trek, you've only got to watch that kind of thing. I mean, the style of Star Trek is the absence of emotion, isn't it? And everyone has obviously, you know, had a lot of prunes the day before yesterday. And there's absolutely nowhere to go. The nearest lavatory is about 4 miles down the road, you know, about as far as Kelly Tarleton's. And this leads to a kind of very serious sort of acting, doesn't it? You know, so they can't move suddenly. Of course they can't move suddenly. Or they couldn't, I mean, you couldn't in Star Trek even cough. You've never seen anyone go in Star Trek, have you? They just don't do that sort of thing. It's their style is this kind of, my God, isn't this serious, isn't it? Yeah, they nod a lot, don't they? Huh? And no one actually said, that's ridiculous. You know, they never say that, do they? It's amazing. They all nod away as if they're talking like characters in Hamlet. Yes, ma'am? I presume I did. I come from Liverpool, and I presume I did once have a Liverpool accent, or a Liverpool Irish accent, which is my background. But, you know, on the way, I mean, I left when I was 14 or 15. I mean, by the time I was 15, you know, I was in a monastery, and there were a lot of peculiar people in there. I mean, there were more peculiar people in there than there were in Doctor Who. But I prefer Doctor Who on balance, yes. And so things happened to me on the way, you know, and then I was in the army, and then briefly in the Navy, and then training in the south of England, and then on tour. You know, one's bound to, I don't know, some people can identify my Liverpool accents are not difficult to lose. It's speech rhythms that remain. And some people notice that I come from the Northwest. Yes. Have I got anything in common with him? Well, I hope I have in common with him, you know, that generally speaking, that I'm rather benevolent. And that, you know, I'm benevolent, yeah. I believe in that benevolence, yes, I do. So I have that, yeah. Say that again? Ah, well, the thing is, we didn't have any money. I mean, that added to the charm, didn't it? I used to like having rows with them when they used to say, you know, you do something on the floor, and they'd say, we're going again. I'd say, why? And they say, because the set shook. And you'd say, well, look, on Gallifrey, you know, that's the kind of architecture it is. Things shake. And they don't like that at the BBC. They say, let's do it again, Tom. And so I would do it again. And because once I'd signed a contract, I could get quite difficult, you know. Towards the end of the contract, and I became very nice again. And then I signed it again, and so it went on. But when I was in America, I went to talk to some people in Chicago or somewhere like that. And there were a lot of science students there. And anyway, one fellow was doing a PhD or something trivial like that on heroes in science fantasy. And so when he got up, he told me that, this big windy speech about doing his PhD and how I was his hero, and I thought, will he never get on with it? He said, but he said, I noticed, sir, that even you are so extraordinary as an actor. He said, I've never seen another actor even come through a door like you. I said, really? Because suddenly he said that. I remember a very great director called John Dexter. He said to me, Baker, you're so boring. You can't even come through a door sincerely. And I do remember that wounding me terribly. I kept thinking to myself, why do I have to come through a door sincerely, you know? I have to come through a door interestingly, but sincerely. But Dexter was a cruel man. Although a mighty director. But, so this fellow said, he said, the way you come through a door is so amazing. I said, well, really, I can't comment on that. No, he said, look, and it was a big do. And he ran his bloody stuff. It was ready. You know, he shouted 28, and they rode Silas Marner's bloody thesis. And there's me coming through a door in Doctor Who. He said, you see what I mean? And the Americans all clapped because they're generous. I said, no. That's got nothing to do with subtlety. It's to do with the British sets. If I'd come to the door naturalistically, we would have had to shoot it again. So everyone was creeping around the whole time, closing doors like that. Otherwise, it wouldn't come. Isn't it? I mean, it's funny, people, you know, years later, people misinterpret that as it being deliberate. It wasn't. I really didn't know what was going on. And as long as it remained funny to do, and I did actually, the only hard work I did was to go out among children and young people in hospitals and schools, and so I fed off them, you know, and as long as they were liking it, I just left it alone. I didn't want to know what to do. I just thought, you know, just respond and keep it rolling. I didn't want to tamper with it or have people examining scenes and saying, maybe this is not serious enough. I'm getting near the end of you, aren't I? Go on. Actually, two people on near Kelly Charlton said hi, Tom, to me this morning. But on the other hand, as I get older, somebody said actually yesterday, but I think they were being unkind. I haven't found the explanation, but somebody said to me, excuse me, are you Jenny Shipley? Is that true? I suppose, yeah, I've been out for a walk, and I was probably looking a bit tense or whatever it was, or maybe I was looking terrific. I don't know who Jenny Shipley is. Yes, sir? What did I say? I said, I'm so sorry, I'm not. I said, I'm not. I was deeply apologetic, because, you know, I hate disappointing people, and he was disappointed. Yes. I don't think anybody knows the difference. We don't know the difference, do we? Well, I don't think we can tell the difference. See, television, you must I hope you agree with me. I'm very fond of people who agree with me. Is that television, you see, is much more potent than the films in this sense. I hope you'll all agree. Television takes place almost necessarily, by definition, in a domestic context. Therefore, it catches you. We are watching television or listening to it, or it is watching us, in our own homes with our guard down, especially early evening television. Our critical faculties are very low after a day's work. And so, it rolls at us. You see, when you go to the movies, you've got to go out to the movies and drive and park and get your popcorn. And then when you're eating your popcorn, you can't hear what the actors are saying anyway, so it doesn't matter. But there's a formality to it, and you sit down and watch it. And although it takes place in the dark, you're actually surrounded by people. So television is more powerful in that way. It's slyer. It impinges on you because you're not critical of it. It's just there. And so when you meet someone from television outside, it's not like trying to meet a movie star. If you saw a movie star, you wouldn't be certain. You would say, is that Jonathan Pryce or is that George Siegel or whoever? But you wouldn't know. But television stars, actually, as soon as you meet them, it's just incredible the way you think that you know them or hate them, depending on what sort of parts they play. So when people used to see me in the street, grannies often used to say, hello, dear. I was very, very popular with grannies. Yeah. I'm still popular. I go to the, shopping malls in England. We have them now. And I go to Waitrose. Waitrose, very upmarket one. It's an extraordinary thing, isn't it, you see? Here I am in the twilight. And I bend down to get some salt or something like that. In fact, I've discovered where I get pinched the most. And I keep getting pinched. It's an appalling thing. Even in winter, I get pinched. And I jump around like that, and there's some lecherous old bag of about 87, kind of whistling like that, or I hear her dentures percussing. But she still adores me, and she's still after me. So I never complain. I never complain at all. I sometimes look at them a bit old-fashioned like that. So there we are. It's strange, isn't it, the power of television. Right? One more before I sign your... Yeah? Yeah, I do have regrets. My life is full of regrets. Anything that I left that was joyous, I regret but I wanted it to go on, and it can't go on, can it? You see, one of the beautiful things and terrifying things about life is that something can't stay just beautiful like that. It's got to grow. And sometimes it's got to be pruned, and sometimes it needs more water, and so on. It goes on. So it was changing, Other people came into it, and the writing changed slightly, and I changed. I mean, the other day I saw a clip of myself in a film running upstairs. My God, I burst into tears. It was incredible. I said to my wife, look, I used to be able to run upstairs. Yeah, it's amazing. Or playing tennis, all those things I used to be able to do. So I do have a regret, but I have a regret, what I'm really regretting is that, is the passing of my vigor, the passing of all those days when, because a lot of people are already dead from there. Yes, sir?
Did the irony that strike you of, in the young days going to the monasteries and later on playing Rasputin, did the irony that strike you?
Well, no, I didn't, because, the history of the church, particularly the history of Christianity, is absolutely riddled with amazing paradoxes. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church, if it wanted to, they've got great spin doctors. They could make murder sound like charity, they kind of burn you if you don't actually agree with them in the past or whatever. Now they're a bit more subtle, but they can still make you feel pretty tense. But, Rasputin actually was a kind of grotesque figure from, a decadent end of the Russian Empire, really. So it was, and also, I didn't really know what I was doing in that one either. It was just a part. And suddenly, I got off the train and off the plane, everyone was giving me lavatory rolls of Spanish money. It was amazing, absolutely amazing time. All this dough was being thrown at me, and cars and people taking my photographs and then asking my opinion. That was the amazing thing about a movie. When you're flirting with movies, people suddenly ask your opinion about things, even though you don't know anything about it. People say, what do you think of the influence of Schopenhauer on Wagner? And I think, my God. I said, well, I think sometimes it may be exaggerated a bit. And they say, right, Tom. And I think, what did he ask me that for? I think about the influence of Schopenhauer on Wagner. Indeed, I don't care. Yeah. Yes. Well, I tell you what, I felt deeply shocked to begin with when that film, but then the next day they rang me up and said, we'll pay you anyway. And so suddenly the grief evaporated. It's extraordinary, isn't it, really? I've always felt that if I was a doctor, we spend far too much in our society on drugs. I think actually when people go to the doctor, they need attention. You know, somebody, when they say to the doctor, they say, I'm feeling terrible. The doctor says, hey, listen, what about a little holiday in Miami? Or what about, you know, some new clothes? Or a few days off or something? But the doctor says, listen, move into the sternum, you know, into the Hyatt Plaza or something like that after a fortnight. People need attention, not, you know, they need some variety in their lives. That's where I come from. Here, I cannot imagine why anyone might be depressed here, but that's an impression I have. You know, I thought I died and would come to heaven. So I can't imagine that here. I haven't seen anyone looking depressed. Actually, I did see a chap talking to himself, and he was smoking 3 cigarettes, which I thought was excessive, outside of that funny little bookshop called Winkles or something. And he, what? Winkles, yeah. And he was having a hell of a time, whoever he was talking to, but I couldn't see them, because I didn't like to pry. But even though, so 3 cigarettes, which I thought was a bit defiant, even though he looked terrible, yeah? Well, I mean, I think that you can't, if you haven't been, you know, to our densely populated, I mean, I work in London 3 or 4 days a week, to live in our big cities, you know, which are heavily polluted. I mean, I don't mean that we have to live there, and people generally, I suppose, are reasonably happy, but, you know, we don't have this wonderful fresh air, we don't have all this space, you're not hugger-mugger, you know, there's stacks of space. Because, you know, cities in a way, although people gravitate towards cities, people are not meant to be. When people are too close together, I think they get anxious. They don't like that, you know, you're trespassed on, and you use your elbows a lot. And so when I was walking up your main shopping street yesterday, I couldn't believe it. I said to my wife, think about Oxford Street. Well, think about Oxford Street, I'd rather be dead. I mean, even at 8 o'clock in the morning, Oxford Street's a nightmare, never mind 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think you're in heaven, yeah. Well, I would be happy. Well, I don't know where I could work here, because you don't have much theatre here, do you? Not very much. I think the radical theatre that young people are starting out don't include, you know, actors near the end of their lives. That kind of theatre of commitment is quite different. But on the other hand, someone might turn up and see me. I see there's a production of Richard III in the park. I certainly would like to have a go at Queen Margaret. I mean, she was a really aggressive old bag. She really was. It's a good part there. Yeah, Maggie Smith did it awfully well. Yeah. I was born off Stanley Road, right downtown in Liverpool. When I say Liverpool Irish, I mean Liverpool Irish by environment. There's no Irish in my blood or anything like that. But everything was Irish around me, you know. All the Irish witchcraft, that is the priests, the teachers, the publicans, they're all Irish, you know. So there was a lot of blarney and a lot of magical, you know, phrases going round. It was quite good. I can remember the tail end of the old Irish women who came over with their families, who would still be, for some families, the first generation who lived to be 80 or 90, smoking clay pipes in long black dresses, smoking, and of course no teeth. That used to amaze me as a child, you know, that kind of time funnel. Yeah.
During the time you were not the freedom producers,
Yeah.
Graham was in John A. Schumer. Did you have any objections to John A. Schumer?
Hey. No, I don't think I had any objections to him. No, he seemed a nice chap. I was talking to him the other day. No, I don't think I had any objections. There's always a collision, you know, when you're actually creating something funny, especially, you know, kind of comedy thriller. It's always a collision of wills, isn't it? You know, I mean, you've got to actually give way. But I was very opinionated about how it should go, and he was equally opinionated, and sometimes he would win, and sometimes I would lose, and then he would win, and then I would lose again. And I began to get rather tired about that, yeah. But we're friends now, yeah. Yes, sir? Well, it might be true. It might be true that I ignored him for 6 months, yes. I thought it was longer than that. But I may have done, but I mean, maybe anxiety, you know. I needed to be wooed. You know, I felt I was an artist. I needed to be wooed. I couldn't just have someone take over as if I was, you know, running an ice cream thing. You know, I felt a big responsibility to an enormous audience, which they didn't feel. I was the one who was out there. When the audience was 8 or 9 or 10 million young people, you know, I took this extreme, I don't mean that I hope I didn't bore them about it, but I mean, I was out there cultivating the customers, you know, my existence was out there, and I wanted to know what they felt and how we were going. and I was very acutely aware of the ratings. If anyone suggested we tamper with something, I said, I'd want to know why. And if someone said, well, I think we did something new, I said, well, why? No, someone says, let's tamper with the beer when it's absolutely great beer. Or someone says, let's try some pepper in the champagne. You say, well, why? We're getting a bit restless here. We just keep things, when things are happy and rolling along, then it behooves us to be a bit attentive. Yeah. One more, and then I'll stop. Well, yes, I mean, I get lots of narrations to do now, voiceovers and everything like that, but I mean, I'm very good, especially on these bad scripts. They get me in, for kind of instant sincerity. And so my job is to transmute trashy words, into rolled gold or something like that, because, an awful lot, one of the things about business and competition is that they tend towards the same. So anyone, as soon as someone comes up with a nice formula, film, it doesn't matter what, book, anything, there's a rip-off movement all the time behind it. So if suddenly someone comes up with a nice line in doing something, someone gets on the back of that, all the time. It gets very cheap. They all copy each other. It's very boring. The way businessmen talk, they are the feeblest of them all, aren't they? I mean, businessmen seem to be so uncertain of themselves that they constantly have a vocabulary of about 46 words. And they keep, snapping their fingers and saying things like, welcome aboard, or they keep talking about uneven playing fields, and things like that, which I find extremely tedious. But that's so that they all know where they are. They keep talking about the team, don't they? And subsuming the individual to the team. And I notice footballers and cricket players doing it now, and all hugging each other. It's quite shocking to me, really. I used to like it when the New Zealanders used to do their war dance, and the British players used to look so embarrassed, and they say, what are they doing, But now we've lost that, and so we've all got together, we're all nibbling each other's earlobes, as if somehow that will bond us and make us less frightened of the All Blacks, It's very nice. And as for association football, I mean, some of them are suffocated, some of them are killed. They score a goal, and, 10 men fall on top of him, and often, by the time they get off him, it looks to me dangerous, but I mean, sometimes they're dead, which strikes me as being defeating the whole object. I know, come on, you've had about, you go on. No, I'm not going to watch the cricket because I'm too nervous. And also, I'm too nervous here because they're nervous, aren't they? Because I don't want to be, I'm a guest in your country, but, that England and New Zealand are both at the kind of distant ends of the cricket world at the moment, and it's making them anxious, because they've both got to prove something outside of just a game of cricket, because they know whoever loses is really down the Swanee. And as we had a terrible time in Africa, I think we beat a team in Matabeleland, and I was so thrilled about it until I discovered they'd only been playing 2 weeks, and it was a tight game. It really was a tight game, and it was amazing. They were all playing with, I don't know. So I didn't want to go and see them. Because I'm afraid, although I long for them to cover us with glory, because as you know, that is the function of young men, not old men. Old men send young men to their deaths or criticize them, but young men, the function of young men and women in sport is to cover the rest of us, ordinary people, with glory. That's why we put such a big weight on them, isn't it? That's what glory is about. To win is to glorious. However, of course, one can lose gloriously. That's not admitted now because they get a hard time. But there's a great line in Milton's Comus, and he talks about there's a glory in fighting for dreams that are doomed to defeat. And so people can, of course, lose gloriously. But I mean, when you see tennis players losing, and you can't sit there, can you? I mean, it is heart-making. I saw some big table tennis, some tennis player the other day kicking his racket about, It was so dull. I mean, I really had to go, and I thought, it was at moments like that I'd quite like to have been God. I really would have sent a thunderbolt down that way. I really would, yes. No, I'm interested in glory and losing gloriously, and anyway, laughing, yeah? Oh, it's impossible. My favorite memory is impossible. I think probably what was amazing was actually getting it, And when I got it, I was very down, and I just had a failure as Macbeth. And when I got it, they asked me, having told me that I got it, they asked me, could I hold the news for about 8 days or 9 days? And it was terrible. That was terrible to have a great part in television, although I didn't realize it was going to be as big as it was. And then to have to sit on it for 8 or 9 days, that was terrible. Yeah. But it was that, yeah, because, I mean, you know, to once have been, I've often quoted it, to have been a child's hero, to once, for 7 years in the United Kingdom, Don't Talk to Strange Men did not apply to me, which raised me, you know. And, I had this access to young people, which is not allowed anymore, have they? I mean, now if you say to a little boy, a little girl, hello, do you fancy an ice cream? He's likely to say, bugger off, you dodgy old man, or something like that, isn't he? This is a terrible, sad thing, and so for 7 years that didn't happen to me. I had access to the hearts of children everywhere, and to their homes, indeed. So I think now, shall I sign a few autographs or whatever? Yeah, go on, ma'am. Yeah. I don't actually make the distinction very much between children and adults. I really don't. I think in the area of the imagination, I mean, of course, there is such a thing as, you may say, there are children's films or children's literature and adult literature, but things, in another sense, and I would defend it hotly, you know, a thing is either well done or it's not well done. And if it is well done in the area of imagination, it will engage anyone. I could have modified what I said by saying that, in a sense, it was a participatory program, in that it engaged children with adults, because nothing in life is so agreeable, is it seems to me, as seeing happy children. And if they're your own children or the children of your neighborhood, and you sit with them watching them being captivated, it is similar to the pleasure of watching them open presents, you know, and you see those faces and you share in it. And so I didn't make the distinction, you see, about what was adult. Because, I mean, it wasn't that complicated, was it? You know, it was just an adventure story, you know, where I was a children's hero. And all the monsters were obvious, weren't they? I used to love it, you know. And I wanted, you know, when the Daleks were always shrieking. Ha! They were always shrieking about exterminating me. And I often wanted to turn to the camera and go, look at this, isn't it? They just don't learn, do they, you know? But the BBC didn't like that at all, yeah. So they never did let me do it. And I've just done it for the first time now. Right, what would you like me to do now? Sign some autographs or books or something, and then I go, yes? I have been, well, you wouldn't say approached, that's far too direct a word for the English. But rather like the chap who wired me up here, feelers have been put out. And feelers have been put out, and so I may very well do it. But I've made it, well, I mean, I've made it very clear there's no point in going back to the old stuff, you know, because you can't actually go back to making it just like that. You've got to find a new way of doing it. I did think perhaps the way of doing it would be someone trying to write Doctor Who's biography, and then after a while, the first adventure is a fellow getting in touch with Doctor Who. When he gets there, he meets the Doctor and says, you know, what these know-alls do. He said, look, I know all your adventures. And the Doctor says, to you, how can you do that? And then it turns out that, rather like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, you know, there are lots of adventures I did for which the world is not yet ready. And then we tell other stories. It might come out like that. You know, with all the new technology you've got of retrieval, and they wouldn't necessarily need to be completed stories either. You know, they could be, and then there could be things, so the Doctor could be actually getting a bit gaga or something like that, and, you know, and have been at lots of battles, or have been a great pal of Copernicus, or, I don't know, someone like that. Or Jenny Shipley, for all I know. Right, so I think I better stop now and I'll sign some autograph. What time is it, please? 2 o'clock. Oh, that was a good hour, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. I didn't much care for that at all. No, I think the K9 thing was dull, actually. It was dull because of the limitation. It was dull because I used to see the actor who played the voice rehearsing, you know. It was just silly. And also, you know, it limited me terribly because I had to get on my hands and knees for every 2 shot. It was terrible, I thought. Really naff. Right, well, okay.
Well, that's it. Here or out there? Or
well, I think I'd rather sign them near the air.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm going to have a coffee and you get a line organised.
Just one moment before you do that, Tom. We're where it was your birthday a few days back.
And don't miss anything.
And we'd also like to express our appreciation for you taking the trouble to be here this afternoon, so we've got you a couple of gifts here.
Oh, great. Do you want me to open it?
Well,
Yeah, I'd like to, yes.
and this as well.
Yeah. I'll scream if this is about Chelsea. It's got to be about New Zealand. I did notice yesterday, am I wrong? But it seems to me in Winkle's, the bookshop, the books are very expensive. I mean, seriously expensive.
Tom will tell you a secret. He works there.
Yeah. You do?
No, I do.
Oh, yeah. Did I see you yesterday? Yes. New Zealand landscapes, yes, how lovely. Oh, yeah, I heard about this. I was talking to Andrew Bogle from the art gallery the other night, and he mentioned Andrew's apps. Oh, this is lovely.
We just put a little inscription inside the front.
Will you? You have done. To Tom, with best wishes and grateful thanks from the New Zealand Doctor Who fan club. Gosh, how amazing. Actually, I think I should get a signature on that to authenticate it. It had to be anyone, yeah. Actually, somebody did say to me last night about this. You know, this boy who said he was my son, the one I didn't recognize. Somebody said to me afterwards, how did you know it was your son? I thought to myself, that's a very good question. And so when a man said to me this morning near the fish tank, said, hi Tom, Sue, my wife said sarcastically, maybe it was one of your sons. You know, because wives actually remember that sort of thing. It's a very kind of classical thing, isn't it? Sometimes I'm watching television, when I'm doing the washing up, I associate it with washing up and scouring pans. And suddenly I see someone who's always on the television, you know, like Joanna Lumley or something. And I say, Joanna Lumley, she seems a nice girl. You know, God, that's a paralysingly dull observation. I say, she seems a nice girl, Joanna Lumley, an awful lot of teeth, but she seems a nice girl. And about 6 weeks later, you know, I'm just eating some fish and I say to my wife, you know, the sauce is a bit off on this fish. And she says, maybe you should get Joanna Lumley to have a go at it. It's funny, isn't it, that people can be so sensitive 6 weeks after. So when my wife said, maybe he's a son of yours, it was just her getting at me a bit, you know. The way people who love each other must necessarily get at each other as well. You know. Right, thanks for that. And, Brookfields, Chardonnay. Yes, that's good. That's good. You know, that's the wine here. The wine here is excellent, isn't it? Because, you know, I'd like to remind you that the first miracle of the New Testament was, of course, what? Thank God bless you, ma'am. Turning water into wine. That glorious miracle, isn't it? That's one of the most tough. I often read the New Testament, and that's a great miracle, that. I love that idea of the whole party, when the mother says to her son, they've got no wine. Isn't that amazing? You said, they've run out of drink at a wedding. And he said to her, the way sons do with their mothers who adore them, he said, well, what's that to you and me? And she said, ah. But she went away and she said, listen, if he says anything, just do it. And a couple of minutes later, he said, yeah, fetch in the water. Like that. Mind you, he did have a very influential father. Okay, well, I'll sign some pictures out there. Or whatever. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Nice to see you.
Okay. I thought we were going to laminate one of these anyway, so sort of double critique. There we are.
Yes, sure. What was that say for?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah,
Things that you can't see when you put them
Oh, thanks.
You just line it outside.
To what?
Anything on the side?
There we are.
For the 3-hour club magazine for our next issue, particularly expressing the right to New Zealand readers.
Well, I think it'd be much better if I wrote it at home first, and if you actually put that in an envelope, I can write it down the next day or so rather than right now. And then I can put it in the post seal.
So you get your photos.
What?
So you get some photos now?
Yes, then I really must go. Right. Go on, yes, go on.
Actually, have you been at taking photos? I'm not taking photographs at all. So we have to style and just
I think well.
you guys just look at this stuff. Thanks. Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome. Nice to see you. Got it? Hang on. All right. Right. Okay, yes, yes.
Let's get your stuff off. Yes, for that, Fredo.
Ready? Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye,
Take care.
John.
Where's the...
Hey, John.
What happened to my book?
Now, here's a copy of that magazine for you.
Okay, there's that. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. You thoroughly enjoyed it. See you in a couple of years' time. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.
We're nearly at the end of this video, but before we go, we've got some time to show you some photographs of the TARDIS set, built by Tiger Films for the New Zealand Superannuation Service's set of commercials. Photos taken by club members Daryl and Edwin Patterson. Next up, we have the One Network news item about the filming of the commercials, followed by the Leighton Smith radio interview with Tom Baker, taken from News Talk ZB.
An unforgettable theme and an unforgettable face. Tom Baker as Doctor Who, time-travelling in the TARDIS.
Well, let me tell you something.
Now the Time Lord has travelled back to his old role in New Zealand. He's starring in a commercial. The hair is white, but the manner is the same.
I don't mind people remembering me like that. It was the nicest job I ever had, really. In fact, I think it was the only success I've ever had. I've been a very successful failure.
For 7 years he travelled with various companions and a mechanical best friend.
I remain.
Always fighting the evils of the universe.
So I was enchanted by them all, you see, because I used to beat them all.
The series started in 1963 and has evolved through 7 Doctors, but for many, Tom Baker is the Doctor, and his role here has given him a taste for the past.
I'm quite shameless and capable of deceiving myself that I could be a hero again.
The producers won't say what all this is intended to advertise. All they will say is that it's on air in 2 weeks, so you'll just have to wait, unless, of course, you've got a way of getting into the future. Simon Shepherd, One Network.
I'm just trying to work out how long it is since I saw Doctor Who and how long it is since I saw Tom Baker on television in Doctor Who. And it has been some little time, but with great pleasure I say good morning.
Hiya, hiya.
And we're in the middle of a chat, actually, when the commercial stopped. Let's pick it up. You were just telling me about how you're out in the harbour yesterday on some mansion on floats.
Well, yes, I was just having a good time, and I'm very interested in pleasure and bliss and being in heaven. I've always wanted to go to heaven or something like that. And the last few days, around here, around this harbour, and meeting New Zealand people, it's felt like heaven, simply because, you know, it's the first time in my life I've been embraced and cosseted. Obviously, of course, there's something about a young country. They quite like antiques or something, but people really have responded to me, you know, as if I was quite a rare antique. So people,
well, you are, it's true.
Well, I am an antique, but I don't know that I'm that rare.
Yes, he said he's really not looking forward to going home tomorrow. He'd like to stay. And I said, why don't you? He said, well, I miss the squalor of London. And I thought that rather described it aptly.
Yes, I think so, but I do have some work to do there.
It's winter, you know.
I know.
It's freezing.
I know. It's absolutely appalling there. I mean, even my cats won't go out. But I've got to go back. You know, that's where I come from. And
how many cats have you got?
9. 9, yeah.
Why do you have 9 cats?
Well, because, you know, I don't have any friends. Of course, I'm a real actor. I don't have any friends. But so I have a lot of cats and a wife.
You must be very insecure to have 9 cats to be your friends. I would have thought the two would have...
No. They're very reassuring. They're Burmese cats, you know, so they're very flattering cats. They're not these kind of... they're not these kind of English silver tabbies, which are more aloof. These are very reassuring ones, yes. I mean, people actually have pets to love, and also they're reassured by their pets. The uncritical adulation of a pet is a universal kind of weakness.
Have you got a TARDIS in your living room?
No, I have a TARDIS in my head, so that sometimes when I'm out of work or I'm not feeling particularly, like enjoying life, you know, I slip away into my imagination to the days when I used to be able to run upstairs or turn my arm over at cricket or swim 4 lengths of a bath. It's all those things. The thing is about having been a fiction, you know, of course, you know, I'm a professional fiction. I'm a professional charlatan. That's my business. But having been once a very successful children's hero, it's been the great comfort.
It wasn't just a children's hero.
Well, the children, you mean the children are middle-aged now, but they were once children.
Well, when was it?
It was 74, 72 to 80 or something. It's 17 years since I finished. And yesterday or the day before, I happened to meet 150 New Zealand fans in some suburb in a little church hall there. It was incredible how they rolled back the time, you know, and knew more about my fictional past than I did. And they were so amusing and kind and excited, really.
See, I'd reached adulthood when you were doing that. And I was wrapped in Doctor Who. I used to love watching Doctor Who.
Yes.
And you were the best Doctor Who, by far.
Well, I don't know. I was the longest, and I did the most. And I think I probably did more research than the others. I went out, you know, among the children all the time, looking for ideas, because, you know, I don't have any ideas of my own, so I'll go anywhere and steal them. And so I used to really go around the schools and the libraries and hospitals and talk to children about it. And if they gave me an idea, then I would, you know, use it shamelessly without ever giving them the credit.
So how long did it run for? You?
I ran for, I think they ran mine for 8 years, but it's been picked up by Rupert Murdoch's Sky or something like that. So it's run, there's a new generation now watching it, because they run it every night or something like that.
But I would want a replica of the TARDIS in my living room or somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, really. Maybe I should have one in my garden outside. When I was in Manchester a few months ago, where I work quite often, it's a wonderful city, although in the winter rather sad. And I'd be walking up the streets, and someone was, you know, 25-year-old boy. Aren't beggars boring when they have this dreary old chat? That beggars really have bad script writers. And in UK, they say, have you got any small change? And the first time it's heartbreaking, and then within half an hour you're absolutely inured to it. And the fellow says, have you got any small change? So I said, sure, yeah. And I reach in my pocket to give him a 50 pence or something like that. And they say, guys, Doctor Who. I said, yeah, you've got a good memory. He said, Doctor Who? I said, yeah, have 50 pence. Have a pound. No, he said, I don't want the money. He said, listen, can't you get us out of here? I said, how do you mean? He said, well, what about the bloody TARDIS of yours? I mean, can't you get us all out of here? And I had this fantasy. It was said to me on, you know, many occasions. It's spontaneous. It was deeply, deeply moving and disturbing, because at 25, children who had watched me at 11 in the security and home, sitting on a sofa full of hopes and fish fingers and secure in the love of their mothers, now, 15 years on, standing on corners begging, and then they ask their old hero if he can't take them away out of it. I had the fantasy, actually, of the TARDIS in St. Peter's Square materializing and all the homeless young people piling into it. I'd take them somewhere nice. And then the next day, the press, you fellas in the press would be saying, all our homeless have disappeared. Who stole them?
Well, this is the one serious question I'm now about to deliver. Do you think that all these people, all these kids, 11-year-olds, secure in their home and with their mother's love, as you put it, you might have helped end up where they are because they were glued to the television instead of getting out and studying?
No, I don't think that at all. That's a typical provocative journalist kind of remark. No,
Not from
because,
me.
No,
No,
but I mean,
no.
the sadness of the sadness is that quite a lot of the people who asked me this question actually studied and got double firsts in wisdom at Cambridge, and there's still no place to use their wisdom, so they're still jerked onto the streets. They work too hard, and still we can't offer
Or they
them a
became
life.
qualified in something that was useless.
Well, that society considers to be useless. That's right.
Yeah.
If you, that's right.
Were the locks, back then, were they yours? or was it...
Yeah, it was all me, yes. It was all me. That's right. Yes,
Because you know what it's like, and you're probably used to this. But he walked in here, and the hair is much shorter. There's no locks, and I thought, hang on, where's Tom Baker?
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's right. I remember when I finished in 1980. I was very, very famous in 68 countries. I'm a big star in Abu Dhabi, for example, and I've never known how to turn that to my advantage. But I walked in very famous into a barber's shop in the King's Road, had my hair cut, and came out and was completely unknown. I stepped absolutely into oblivion just by cutting my hair.
Anonymity.
Anonymity.
It was a great trademark, though, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And it was yours.
Yes, it was all mine.
Do you ever stop to think, because I know that things were different back 17 years ago in the English media, and things have changed dramatically, and there's now far more reward, and if you were now successful, if you were now doing Doctor Who to the success that you were then, it would be on primetime American television, and you would be paid mega millions.
I would, yeah.
Ever frustrate you?
Well, no, I don't really, because, I mean, that would be, that would be to fill me with regrets. No, I think whatever has happened to me, fate has kind of allowed it for dark, comical reasons of its own, because, I've never had a strategy. And even Doctor Who, which was really my only huge success in my career, was, just a little happy accident that grew and grew like Topsy. I mean, I had no strategy about that. I've never had, because, I'm just an entertainer. And, I came down here to do some commercials down here. But, it wasn't just that I was willing to do some commercials. I wanted a little adventure, and I had a little spare time. And so I flew down here. It's,
Have you tried bungee jumping, speaking of adventure?
No, I wouldn't try that at all. I really do think that would be going a bit far, wouldn't it? I mean, it's...
Don't try it in New Orleans.
I wouldn't try it anywhere.
Well, the Super Bowl's just been on. Maybe you didn't know.
Actually,
but they had this. I think they spent about $1.5 million on the halftime entertainment for the Super Bowl, and in the practice, a woman got killed practicing a bungee jump. So I read it and I thought, well, there's another good reason why I'd never do it.
But isn't that must be actually in the minds of people who are watching bungee jumpers, must it? That maybe it will go wrong.
Oh heavens! Oh, you mean that they're getting some thrills?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, I often think that actually in a half-time it would be quite nice to, I went the other day to a kind of shark place up the road.
Kelly Tarleton.
Kelly Tarleton's a lovely name, isn't it? Kelly Tarleton, a famous 19th century.
You must have been impressed with that.
Well, I was, yes, but I kept thinking when I saw those little sharks there, it'd be quite nice to pass the time. You'd get bored after a while. It'd be quite nice, for example, in the midday, if you threw muggers to sharks. That would really rev it up and give people something to watch. I would have thought that would be quite nice and a good way of disposing of muggers.
Gang members as well, yes.
Yes, anyone. It makes life intolerable for most of us. Yes, it'd be quite nice to throw them to sharks.
What are you going back to do?
I'm going back to present a series of programs for BBC Radio on science. Science now that appeared to be fantasy, fantastistical a few years ago and is now a fact. And I don't really know much about it.
Wrong question.
Because, I'm just a presenter, so I don't need to understand it. All I'm required to do is to give the impression that I understand it.
But anybody who could fly the TARDIS must be able to understand a bit of basic science.
No, I don't agree. No, you're making these terrible assumptions. No, not at all. No, I knew nothing at all. Anyway, the point is about the joke about the TARDIS I like to joke about government, is, they're pressing buttons and looking for the correlatives or whatever it is. They don't know where, and it goes, and they open the door, they don't know where they are. They pretend they know where they are. But the joke about the TARDIS was that we never knew where we are. Where we landed up was because the navigation aids didn't work. Like life, really.
And here you are in New Zealand as a result. Speaking of life, mine is now complete. I can die happy. I've met Tom Baker. Thanks for your time. Sorry you've got to go home tomorrow.
Pleasure.
Word of advice. Plan for the future, and you'll be ready for anything.
Of course, I hear you say. It's easy for him. He's a Time Lord. He's been there often enough. Well, let me tell you something. You don't need a Gallifreyan time capsule or even a sonic screwdriver to shape the future. The answer the whole universe has been seeking for centuries is at the end of a telephone line.
New Zealand Superannuation Services. Yes, I knew you'd be surprised.
Oh, they're arriving. Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the life of a Time Lord. Traveling through time and space, toying with the future, mastering it, shaping it to your own design.
Of course, anyone can do it now.
What does it take to shape the future? A beryllium time transformer? A sonic screwdriver? Or just the uncanny ability to remember a telephone number?
The future. So much easier to plan for once you've been there.
Of course, it helps to have one of these. A beryllium time transformer. The next best thing is a telephone number which will help you to start a savings plan for the 21st century.
Take it from a Time Lord. However you plan to spend your future, plan on having something to spend.
The past is filled with those who didn't care to plan for the future.
I'm not saying that a regular savings plan would have saved the Krakonoids on Tar 7 from a life of financial drudgery and dependence. Then again, you never know. Remember, however you plan on spending the future, plan on having something to spend.
What does it take to shape the future? A beryllium time transformer? A sonic screwdriver? Or just the uncanny ability to remember a telephone number?